Welcome to Myth Informed. I'm your host, Brian Edward, Sans co-host today. But we have got a really, really good guest for you today. And before I introduce her, I do want to say, please, if you want to help us, subscribe to us on Subscribestar, even a $1 donation, anything that kind of helps get the message out there. And again, what our mission statement is, we're trying to increase viewpoint diversity to limit the effects of authoritarianism. So if you want to help us in that goal, please do. So I don't have a co-host, but I do have an extra special guest, Josephine Mathias on YouTube under My Name is Josephine. I think I found her when she had maybe 30,000 subs. She's up to, I think, 110,000 now. So she's a YouTuber that uses her political science background to explore trending and socio-political topics. She's a free speech advocate that identifies, quote, somewhere in between classical liberal and democratic liberal. Welcome, Josephine.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be back.
No, absolutely. Thank you. Did I get that right? Is that what is a democratic liberal and a classic liberal?
Honestly, I just wanted to find a way to explain what my views are and just put a bunch of words down that sounded right. I think I would classify myself more as a social democrat. I really hate putting myself in a box, but it's just a mixture of, I guess, socialism, which we can get into later. To be honest, I honestly can't answer that question because I don't want to put myself in a box, and I don't want to say this is what I am, because you could probably find the definition and I would be like, never mind.
I know. So I was going to say, like, center left is a big thing, but the problem with saying that is it puts you in a box. Now you have to be center left on every issue. I mean, isn't it okay to, like, sometimes be right wing on one issue? You could be far left on another, and this and that. It doesn't seem like you have to pick from the box. It's like pulling the lever when you're voting, all Republican, all Democrat. I mean, a lot of people to match the ballot.
Yeah, I think it's crazy, and I get a lot of criticism from my videos where I like the idea of watching my videos and not really knowing what to expect, like what my opinion on a certain topic will be. But then that means that I will receive comments from my right-wing fans who are saying that the video is too liberal, and comments from my liberal fans that it's too right-wing. Look, I'm not trying to please a certain box or certain camp. I'm really just trying to, share what is true. And I'm sorry if that is right-wing or left-wing. I really don't care. Yeah. All that matters is the truth, to be honest.
And you do it well. I've seen you kind of an equal opportunity offender, offending both sides. I mean, just by saying I'm a free speech advocate, can rub the ire of certain people if you're on the intersectional left. They have a completely different concept of free speech. But then you also went pretty hard after Turning Point USA on one particular Charlie Kirk video that you critiqued, and then you played this, like, some psycho music as you read your replies.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about, where I have the TPUSA video where, I fundamentally disagree with a lot of the things that they stand for, but at the same time, I'm an advocate of free speech, and I think that we should all have a voice. Sorry, we should all be able to have a say in whatever issues are going on, but, you shouldn't have to stick to one side. I think there's I don't know who tweeted this. I think it was Amazing Atheist. He said, if you agree with someone 100% of the time, then you have to consider the fact that you're a moron. So I really do stand firm by that. But I can take all the criticism. As long as I'm staying true to myself, I'm fine with it, for sure.
It makes sense. And Turning Point USA it's an organization I hadn't even heard about at all, as opposed to, say, the last 2 years. And I think it's because of the fervor that's, like, erupted on college campuses. And this is kind of one of the Republican responses. I think Young Americans Foundation, which seems to be more of the traditional conservative group, is another reaction on college campuses. Is that way you see it?
Yeah, there's the difference, right? There's Turning Point USA, where they're focused mainly on shock value, and really just, if you just go through their website alone, it's repulsive. Everything on there is just propaganda. Whereas you can have, like, the other, which one was the other one you named?
Young Americans Foundation.
Yeah, I don't really know much about them, but I'm sure there are other organizations like TPUSA where they are advocating for conservative ideas on college campuses, but they're not doing so in the way that, TPUSA is doing. I think I just probably just disagree with their tactics than it is really what they're saying. It's just replacing one propaganda with another. It's saying capitalism kills, socialism kills, and it's like, this isn't going to solve anything. We're not actually doing anything with this conversation. So I think they're really just making it worse. But yeah, there are a lot of groups that are in place that can actually help combat the far left, ideologies on college campuses. But yeah, TPUSA, oh Lord, I can't deal with them. I can't.
Well, I think, yeah, I think you were picking on Charlie Kirk specifically, saying like, okay, we've got to back Trump on this issue, or we can't critique Trump on this issue, just kind of hold the line, which is almost, I mean, it's a little bit reminiscent of like, the Pope putting out a papal bull. This is what Catholics believe.
Yeah.
And you're a Catholic, so you believe it.
Exactly. I mean, the irony of it all is that they're saying they're champions of free speech and thinking for yourself and all of that fun stuff. There isn't any thinking for yourself here. They're telling you how to think, which is the complete opposite of what they're claiming to advocate for, which I think is ridiculous. And I think one of the biggest problems is that they are advocating to children, literal children. I mean, sure, 16, 17-year-olds you may not consider as children, but literal children. They're advocating these ideas that are not fully fleshed out. They are very problematic. And I mean, I don't even know what the question I'm answering here. I could probably just go on a rant for hours about TPUSA, but it really is an issue for sure. They
have a pretty dynamic speaker in Candace Owens, and I actually, although I don't always agree with her, I do find her a powerful advocate. She seems to be unflappable under pressure, and she's a fighter. And she does kind of challenge the narrative. So I generally like Candace Owens providing a counter narrative, but you're right. You don't want the counter narrative itself to become ideological.
Exactly. Couldn't said it better myself.
Okay, cool. All right. So that's a Turning Point USA. But now in the universities, like specifically in Canada, Wilfrid Laurier University kind of broke onto the scene. And it seems like Bill C-16 and Jordan Peterson were happening all at the same time. Like, what's going on with Canadian universities?
Oh, I mean, to be honest, I'm not really as aware as I probably should be about the, I guess, state of free speech. What I do know is that there was a law that was passed by the Ford government, and he made it, what was it? The schools will face funding cuts if they did not adhere to some free speech policy. I think they based it on the University of Chicago's policy. Probably completely wrong about that, so do not quote me on that. But so currently, I think the majority of schools or universities failed this test. So they were all supposed to come up with free speech policies in January. They all failed. And it's May now, and a lot of these schools they don't really care for it. And, the biggest ones, which is University of Toronto, Ryerson University, Laurier, as well as York University, are really the driving forces behind the anti-free speech movement. And it's just mainly run by the student unions. There's just a lot of people involved that really just want to censor or silence people for absolutely no reason. But I don't know if it's getting worse or if it's getting better, but I will tell you that is something I would like to investigate this summer. So I'm working on a little project on that topic itself.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. And so it was something that I'd learned at on your channel, because after Wilfrid Laurier University, this is, and if people aren't completely familiar, this is when I'm blanking on her name right now, the graduate student
Lindsay Shepherd?
Yes, Lindsay Shepherd kind of was getting roasted by the diversity czar, and recorded them and recorded the speech where they were so forceful in their language that she was starting to cry, and it did sound like a police investigation, and so it was weird that you would be grilling a graduate student that much. It goes viral, and this really hurts the credit of the university. But then I didn't realize that they had patched this code in response, and they were supposed to be compliant by January this year.
Yeah,
and it's really interesting. And then they could potentially lose funding if they're not. And based on the Chicago principles, I thought this was a really good piece of of legislation. And then you mentioned it was specifically the a Marxist group, or the Marxist student group, that opposed it.
Yes, I mean, who could have expected that for sure? Yeah, it was specifically the Marxist group, and I think there was something in the policy that said you can't physically obstruct something, and they said protesting itself is obstruction. And it's like, dude, I mean, we laid it out. Just don't stand in front of someone when they're trying to speak. It really isn't that difficult. Like, challenge them, don't stop them. That's
Right.
really all it is.
I mean, they raised, and you admit this, they raised one bit of a point, and they're saying, well, the protest itself is inherently obstructive,
Yeah,
and you concede that, but at the same point, free speech is the right of the people that have gathered to hear the message.
exactly.
So you can't obstruct that message to go. And it looks like that they've adopted those principles. So hopefully that would be that. I would love to see Betsy DeVos or something, the Trump administration crank out a piece of legislation or at least a dear colleague letter to that effect. Not sure if the universities would follow it though.
Yeah, I do not think they would be following it for sure. I mean, I don't know about how it is for you guys, but a lot of the presidents of our universities are pretty far left wing, and they make it very obvious. I mean, if you can't wear a costume of Trump, you can't wear a Trump costume for Halloween, for example, because it's too triggering to students. And if like, yeah, I know it's ridiculous. And if the dean is sending this, I mean, all hope is lost. But the good thing about it is a lot of these universities are, losing funding because of tuition. So less students want to go to these schools because they're giving in to protesters. I mean, why would I pay thousands of dollars to go to a school where a couple of kids can yell loud enough and everything changes? So that is a good thing, I guess, is that they're losing funding because not many students want to go into those schools. So fingers crossed that keeps going until they catch a hint or something.
Yeah, and it seems like, and I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but the federal government has an enormous amount of control over these universities. Not so much that they're getting federal funding, but all of the tuition is backed through student loans, much of which, the large majority of which is federally funded. I mean, if you pulled student loans, I mean, that's the card that I think that the federal universities can pull, at least in America.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are different things that or policy changes that could be implemented to help, deal with the situation. But it's just really sad to think that, honestly, I feel like in a matter of 4 years, so, before Trump gets elected, everything's fine. There's events and shows. Trump gets elected, all of a sudden, everyone feels oppressed and everyone feels like, all hell breaks loose. And it's bizarre to really look back and see the freakouts and students saying that we can't have this discussion because it's too upsetting to this type of students. And it's like, we're going to go into the real world after this, right? Like, I don't understand what we're being cuddled for. Like, the real world, life sucks. Life is hard. Life is difficult. Life is pretty messed up. So if you can't deal with it, then I'm sorry, you're not, cut out for the real world. But it really is just bizarre to think that students are just becoming so weak. And of course, there are some people that shouldn't, I don't want to say shouldn't be able to speak at universities if they're inciting violence. But I mean, it's ridiculous to think that no one should.
Yeah, I think it's more than just the universities. Like when you say that it gets out into, like when you get out into the real world, you'll get a rude awakening. But that doesn't mean, why not just change? If you can change universities to your liking, why not change the real world to your liking? And it seems like, that these same kind of mobs. I wonder too if is it really all of the administrators that want to do this? Is it liberal faculty members that have gone far left, or are they being bullied by activists? Are they just giving in to the pressure, or do they really want this? I think most of them are giving into the pressure.
Yeah, that is I think the basic point. And it's really easy to, because once a person of color says, I feel hurt, I feel, disadvantaged, I would like you to do something about it as a minority, then I mean, it sounds wrong not to. I understand. So the pressures are there for sure. And especially when, I think I've talked about this a couple times, once you get the racist label, it's very, very hard to get that out. So, the best thing to do, it's in the university's best, what's the word? Interest, to actually listen to these activists and actually give in to what they're saying, unfortunately. But, oh gosh.
Yeah, at least in the short term, I can see what your point is, right? Because they're going to be like Lady Macbeth, out damn spot of racism.
Yeah.
But okay, so I don't know if you watched the 3-part series on Evergreen State College. to that kind of, it's a documentary of like the Brett and Heather's trials over there.
Yeah, I actually have not seen the documentary, but I am informed about the situation at Evergreen.
Yeah. So he has a really good quote at the end. The last, I think the last 3 minutes of this are profound. Brett says, he goes, what we're talking about isn't free speech, and it's not necessarily it's only tangentially about college campuses. He says, quote, it's a breakdown in the basic logic of civilization. It jeopardizes the ability of civilization to continue to function. These ideas were wrong, and we're giving analytical affirmative action to bad, toxic, ill-conceived ideas, and to the extent that they hold sway and invade institutions on which civilization depends, civilization itself will come apart.
Damn.
Those are pretty strong words, right?
Yeah.
You know, then they're playing like some music in the background, which makes them even more powerful. And what he's saying is it's the ideas themselves. Like when critical theory comes in, or some of the radical social justice things, these ideas can tear apart just about any institution, whether it's the university or police or government or the tech sector or any business. I mean, what are your thoughts on this? Is it the ideas do people care? Is it just straight bullying?
Well, I mean, I'm not really sure what the question is. Sorry.
So I guess, what do you blame, like some of the, yeah, I'm thinking in my head and not projecting well. Like some of the tenets of like intersectionality, like that lived experience, so that identity matters, but it's the lived experience of that identity that matters the most, and we must push those people up. And so their conception of free speech is that, you know, Brian, you may think that you hold XY views, but you're speaking as a privileged white man. And of course you would say that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I need to do is privilege other voices and push them up because they have a different experience. And we can tell that based on the color of their skin and the intersections of the oppression. Like,
yeah, like the whole, sorry.
Yeah, to me, that kind of theory can clog any institution. I just wondered what your thoughts were.
Yeah, the whole idea behind intersectionality, I think, is ridiculous. Like oppression Olympics, who has the most oppression gets to speak. Like this isn't a game, this is real life. But in terms of lived experiences itself, I do think there is a little bit of truth to this. And I think I figured this out a little bit earlier this year, where lived experiences are important to a certain extent. When it comes to creating policy, when it comes to, you know, trying to form change, I understand that you need the facts and logic and the statistics there. That doesn't really have to do with lived experiences. However, if you were to create a policy for the inner city, for example, where there's a lot of you know, violent crime occurring, what a person outside of that type of community would think is, okay, so we need more police. However, it's only a small minority of, you know, Black people that are actually committing crimes in these communities, and the majority of them are actually just afraid. And now that's forming a relationship with the police, with just regular Black Americans or Black Canadians who are not really doing anything. So now they're being harassed, they're being attacked, they're being all of that, simply because there's just more crime there, which I understand. That's why more police is there. But if you don't understand that point by, you know, going there and seeing that it's actually not all the communities that are like this, it's just this little small percent, then you can probably create policy that's different than someone looking at it from the outside. So that's where I see lived experiences as being important. It's yeah.
But yeah, I don't think you have to, but a person could understand that didn't grow up in the inner city, as long as they were extraordinarily familiar with what's going on, had a lot of connection with this, has done their homework.
But wouldn't that count as
you have to be shot at in order to be against gang violence, and you understand what it really is.
Yeah, no, I agree. But wouldn't that count as a lived experience, like going out and trying to figure it out on your own and understanding what's going on within these communities? I would argue that's lived experience. That's going out.
It's not lived identity experience, though.
Sorry?
But I can't. It's not. But it's not related to your identity. So
no.
This is what I can't figure out, and I'm still trying to figure out with some of the identitarian left, which I'm going to disagree with, but I still can't tease out what's more important, the identity or the lived experience.
That's a great question. I feel like
What if I was that person? And like you said, you kind of would agree, if that was my experience, and I knew that you're saying okay, you're qualified. You do have the lived experience to go through, but I'm sure that the fact that I don't have the right identity, is that gonna? It worked for you, but is it gonna work for anyone else? On the radical left, I don't know.
yeah, no, that's where I think I disagree with the radical left, where you need to be a black person in order to do it. But there could be a white person that could be just as informed in the inner city as a black person could, and could, bring about some change. I mean, look at freaking Kim Kardashian. She's bringing more people out of prison than, Colin Kaepernick is kneeling. So
Yeah.
the skin color doesn't, necessarily matter, but I mean more of understanding what is going on within certain communities, which I guess I would define as lived experience. But your identity, I don't think really matters. Where I see identity as mattering would probably be in terms of schooling, for example, in inner cities, where a lot of the students get what's the word, expelled and suspended because they're bad kids. However, that's because the teachers do not understand that these students are from broken homes, who do not really know anything better, who do not have, fathers, who do not have proper education. So they are going to act out. So maybe you shouldn't kick them out, because it just creates the cycle. So that's when, even then, a freaking white person could do it. So yeah, you're right. It really doesn't matter, but I will probably find a place where it does matter. But it really doesn't matter for sure.
I know it's sometimes my analogy for this is, who knows more about giving birth? A woman that's now, or a woman who's never been pregnant, or a male gynecologist with 40 years of experience, right? To me, that it's the obvious, it's the latter, but
Yeah.
that person could never give birth. Now a woman gynecologist also has 4 kids, probably her, right?
Yeah.
She's been on both sides of that. So it's one of those things that I'm trying to figure out with identity. And now, do you think identity has any positive aspects?
In what way?
So here's my theory, is that identity has, I'll give it this, because I think there's mostly a downside, especially to, say, a racial identity, but it can create an in-group that feels good.
Mm-hmm.
All right. When we see like some of the school shootings, and I'm not talking about like gang shootings and targeting ones, but the ones that seem nihilistic, the ones where person comes in, shoots X amount of people seemingly at random.
Yeah.
They always seem to be like middle-class white kids. You're like, why aren't we seeing any middle-class black kids? We should have seen one by now, by the odds. Why are white people who are making significantly more than black people on average killing themselves at a much higher rate than black people on average? So my thought is that the identity can create a cohesion for your life that's positive, that gives you some purpose.
Well, identity in terms of race, like a black
Yeah,
and white.
you could race, yeah. I'm a black American, or I'm,
Well, I mean, yes, it can give you a sense of purpose, but I think that the purpose is a little misplaced. And you can have an identity as an African, Nigerian, Canadian, for example, or Jamaican, or there are different, tribes and cultures within just the black skin itself. So saying I'm black and proud, for example, I think is useless. The only thing that you're proud of is your skin color. Then you really need to figure your life out, I think. And but I mean, I understand that tribalism may be natural. However, as someone that has grown up in the inner city to the suburbs and gone to university, where the majority of people I see around me are white, I really don't feel a need to stick to my people or stick to the people that look like me. I stick to the people that have my sense of humor that I find personally interesting. So my personal, I guess, experience with that is I don't really see a connection. Me and another black person, I think we could be completely different or completely similar. And yeah, I don't think skin color should be an identity.
right. And how many people are going to know that you're like a Nigerian Canadian versus Nigerian American, or some or African American? Most people aren't going to be able to make that distinction. And you mentioned too, like, that Nigerian Americans and Nigerians in, I don't know if this was in Canada or in America, are making more than the average white person.
Yeah.
So the subdivisions within a racial identity mean a ton. But it seems to me when I talk to a lot of my Black American friends that they'll say that that there's a feeling that you can see when you see another Black person that feels good, that there is a sense of camaraderie there, but it comes at the cost of being caught in a little bit of groupthink, that there's certain things you also can't say.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like you said, it's hard to tell if someone is, Nigerian, Jamaican, and whatnot. And sorry, oh damn, I just lost my point. Wait, it's coming back. Wait. No, it is not. Can you repeat what you said? Actually,
well, a certain amount. There's a certain that they've said that I feel good when you see another Black person in the store, you can nod, but then it comes at the cost of having to censor yourself on some opinions.
Yes. So the idea of seeing another Black person in the room and feeling like a sense of comfort or a sense of like, oh, I feel like togetherness or whatever. I think that comes from just being a minority. That's something that I tend to do as well, where I'm in a room and I'm the only Black person and another Black person walks in, we make eye contact and it's like, yo, come sit over here. But it's mainly like if I were to go to a party and everyone was wearing red and I wore white and the other person that wore white came in, I'm like, yo, you want to sit next to me because we're the only ones that wore white. Whereas I want to ask you this question: if you're in a room with the majority Black and you see another white person, would you want to connect with that person?
I don't think so. No, because there's zero sense. I don't have zero sense of racial identity.
Well, I would argue that's because you are used to seeing majority white. But when you're not used to that, there is a psychological aspect of, I want to be next to the person that looks more like me because there's so many people that do not look like me. I tend not to do that. I'm so used to having, all sorts of different races around me. But there are certain times where I understand a need or a want to be close to or talk to someone that is of the same race as you. Apart from that, like once the event is over, like we all go home, have a great time, like nice to meet you, man, I don't really care for you, and that's it. But
yeah, no, it's interesting. I think I don't know, I think that because identity is so important, like when they're talking about a racial identity, to just what you said, immigrants or Black Americans or Black Canadians, that it's almost like the intersectional left is saying, well, dang, we're kind of left out, but instead they've created the white identity, but it's not the white supremacist, like alt-right identity, right? Everyone knows that's bad. Instead, it's the identity of the woke ally. Like that's the only identity that's appropriate for you as a white person. I hate it. What do you think? Are they cultivating a white identity in that way? I think yes. What do you think?
Yes, it's an us versus them thing. They created we are oppressed. We are the ones that are being attacked. You're attacking me. So they've, created a clear divide there. And I hate the assumption that just because you're a white person, you have to really just virtue signal for the rest of your life in order to make up for your whiteness and whatnot. I think that is ridiculous. And it only just makes the conversation worse. Like there's a lot of really bad actors in the social justice, I guess, world that they don't really care about justice. They just care about pointing fingers and putting the blame on this race and this one person, when in reality, I mean, again, referencing Kim Kardashian, you can actually just go out and do it.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's bizarre. I mean, I received a lot of hate towards me, for example, where my boyfriend is white, and they say things like, why are you, sleeping with the oppressor and all those fun stuff. I know. And I'm like, I mean, how can you even respond to that? That's just racist. I don't even understand how this is a Black person telling me this. So I think the whole idea that in order to redeem yourself as a white person, you basically have to, give me reparations, which I don't mind, by the way, if you're offering reparations. But I mean, it's ridiculous for sure.
I've always thought too, okay, I mean, no one, I can even appreciate the history. You'll say, okay, but we're 160 years past slavery or so, but they'll say, but it's the history, it's the Jim Crow, and think of how awful slavery was. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. But like, if you got reparations and then you were a Black person that traced your roots, and it turns out that you were from the tribe that actually that was the slavers selling the other West African tribes into slavery, do you get reparations or do you have to pay them now?
Yeah.
How are we going to determine this?
Yeah, the reparations debate is absurd. Like, what are we gonna do? We're gonna take DNA tests of everyone and then like go down the line. I like that if you find some Black people that are actually slave owners, it's like, what do you do with these people?
I know.
Oh God. But I mean,
What if you're
here's
a mix of slave and slaver, a white slaver? What if you're a mix of a Spanish, slave ship owner and a slave?
yeah, and what happens to the Irish? Do they get reparations?
Yeah,
Like, do you want to play this game? I mean, you just keep going down the line of who deserves it.
yeah. These are tough, and I heard an argument too that to the extent I like watching the debates between Glenn Rowley and John McWhorter, and they're on like Blogging Heads TV, and they talk about race all the time. They're really, really good. They're good conversations. And John said, like, to the extent that reparations would actually like stop it, if the Black leadership would say, okay, that's good, we've turned a corner, we have a celebration, we cut a ribbon, and the problem goes away, that they're saying, okay, now things are good, now we can come together, it might actually be worth it. But I don't think it would ever be. That he doubted that the Black leadership would then turn that corner, that in some ways staying in the oppressed category isn't itself a benefit.
Yeah, I mean, it is great to feel like everyone wants to help you to get things handed to you for sure. But I do think that there are some remnants of here's the problem. There's a lot of social justice activists out there who I mean completely disagree with, and they are freaking ridiculous. But I think the majority of my criticisms lie on their tactics as well as their creating false solutions for real problems. So the solution being reparations, just handing cash to people. That's not really going to do anything. So when they say things like, but think of the history and the slavery and all of that, what they're actually trying to say is, the schools in these neighborhoods that have been left behind through gentrification and these areas are not doing as well. And because of the way the education system works with housing taxes, these areas are actually have horrible schools, which means the students are going there and not learning as much, which creates this cycle. And then if you explain it that way, you can probably understand that better than, well, the history and slavery. It's like, dude, everyone disagrees with slavery. I don't think I've ever freaking met a single person who isn't like a literal racist that says, oh yeah, that was great. But like there are parts of slavery and Jim Crow and whatnot that are reflective today, but the solution is not reparation. The solution is not pointing to white people of today because they did absolutely nothing wrong. The solution is actually going on the ground and trying to change policy and talking to politicians, not being more freaking divisive. It's bizarre. I mean, I've had it up to here with activists. They're just because I know what the problem is, or I see what the problem is. I see what the solution is, and their solution is just way over there. Anyway, I'm sorry. I can rant about this.
Totally. I'll add to that in a second, but we actually have a listener question. So Miles says, hey guys, question for the guest. Recently saw an appearance of Omar Kadir on TV. He was given a standing ovation. Thoughts? Seems in poor taste. Okay, Omar, I think who he's talking about is the imam that recently gave the invocation for the Senate. Do you know who Omar Kadir is? Is that ringing a bell?
Yeah, but I'm not sure I know the story you're about to.
Well, I think and if I could be totally off here. So, but I thought that he recently gave like the opening prayer for session, right? He was invited to do that, but he's also said some other questionable things, and there was one, but it's escaping me. So we'll have to hit that later. I got looking that up. But here's one of the other things that I was picking on like on that identity, and what I agree that they're attacking the right problem totally in the wrong way.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we've got a leaky boat, so let's drill another hole in it.
Exactly.
That's a good idea. And a lot of this, I think the white identity, like this woke white ally identity, it feels good for the person holding it as is a redeemer. I'm redeemed, and then to some extent you can maybe use this to club some of your enemies too. But how many Black people have you helped?
Yeah.
And you made a really good point in one of my early videos when I found you, and you said, all right, you showed you took all of the different like racial groups and compared like the median incomes, and you said, even if every bit of racism, poof, disappears 5 seconds from now, Black people are still poor.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So by fighting this perceived racism out there, like, the little slights that, oh my God, you dressed up as, I don't know, you upvoted some problematic
You
person.
wore dreadlocks, you.
Yes, or something like that, or you went to the same college where that, Virginia governor went to, or something. Um, you haven't helped anyone. Like, why not go into like underprivileged communities and tutor, offer like volunteer half a day a week, something like this. Something could make a real impact, as opposed to pounding on people that you don't know on Twitter that are opposed to you.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, something that's really interesting was I visited a boys and girls club in the area that I used to live in the inner city, because I love engaging with the students there and talking to them. And the head of the organization actually told me how much he disagreed with Black Lives Matter and all the similar activism movements, because he actually gave the same point. They're giving the wrong solutions. If you really want to help, come in here and actually talk to these students instead of going on the news or stopping the Pride Parade. I'm not sure if you heard about this, the Black Lives Matter Toronto Stop the Pride Parade. Like, these are all different things that they're doing. Meanwhile, it's like these organizations are fighting or working their butt off to help these students graduate high school, to help get them into college universities. That's how you can help. If you don't actually have the money to do it, you can do on the ground work instead of just inciting more fear. And that's the freaking issue, is that more and more Black people today claim that America is racist than a year ago, than the year before. Come on. I mean, it's just a matter of they're just being influenced by these activism groups into believing that they're being, I don't know, targeted right now.
Yeah, I know. I do. I think that we're scaring African Americans, we're scaring minorities to an extent with all of this. And you're absolutely right. I totally agree on that activism. It that on the ground work trumps activism in so many ways. And one of the things is activists are not elected.
Mm-hmm.
So the folks that are lobbying, that the trans lobby that it's advising Bill C-16, and then that's also advising the Canadian version of the NCAA. These people aren't elected. Black Lives Matter isn't elected.
Yep.
But yet we're meeting with them, and the presidents, the government. And I think to Miles's question, and if I did get the guy right, that like why did the Democrats often pick Muslims that are the more fundamentalist stripes? Why aren't they picking like the Canadians Tariq Fatah or Raheel Raza? These are Irshad Manji, even like the much better reformist minded Muslims that put this out in front, like give Islam a chance for a decent reputation.
Yeah, I agree. And there was actually a study by the New York Times, but don't quote me on that, on how the Democratic Party on Twitter, how different it is with the Democratic electorate itself. So the majority of, fudge, what was the saying? So the Democrats on Twitter are not the same as the Democrats that are actually going out to vote. So that's something that's really interesting. So the Democratic Party, a lot of people that are spending time on social media and involving themselves in social media probably assume that the Democratic Party should be more of the, Ocasio-Cortez type and, more socialist, more far left. But actually, the majority are not. They're more centrist, or actually argue that they're conservative. Which is really interesting. So there's this weird thing happening now with the Democratic Party where, I mean, you see Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders are both polling very high, yet they're literally polar opposites. So I think the Democratic Party is probably trying everything and hoping one will stick. It's just like a please not Trump all out campaign. Let's give the radical Muslim, the normal Muslim, the radical Black person, the normal Black person. So hoping that maybe one of them will land. And oh Lord, what a disaster that's going to be for sure.
And maybe it's the activists bully so hard and push, because some of the people that are doing the on the ground work, these are good, genuine people. But this was, in 2008, like it was CARE and ISNA, the Council for Islamic Relations was the primarily meeting with Obama. And this is before we had a lot of the cultural strife. So it seems like some of these people are getting in at government levels, maybe because they maybe they don't have a good agenda.
Yeah, and going back to your point about Black Lives Matter and whatnot not being elected, it's an interesting fact that I ran into last year was that only 7% of students actually vote for the student union president, and the driving force behind Bill C-16 was the student unions. The student unions are made up of Black Lives Matter and feminists and whatnot. So in fact, it's really interesting to think that if you were to actually ask every single one of the students what their views are on certain issues, it would probably be drastically different than these activists themselves. It's a 1% speaking for everyone else. And, they're going up to, they're lobbying government, they're lobbying all these different groups on behalf of what they say the students, but the students didn't vote them in. They're fighting for us. I love when people fight for me and I didn't freaking ask for it.
No, it's really good. How do we stop that? Like, how can we stop this quote unquote activist review? We're seeing it in science too, that, a published paper, but activists don't like it. So now instead of peer review, it's activist review. But like you said, these are the people setting the policies on the advisory board. Like, do you see any way to combat that?
Honestly, I think it's just probably going to have every student be more involved, and not every student, but more students be more involved in campus politics in general, because these changes are affecting them. And again, there probably again needs to be some type of countering voice within these college campuses, and not TPUSA, please, where they can really show the students the alternative side, because all they're being fed is, Black people are oppressed. I'm a Black person, listen to me, and we're not going to have any speakers at the school again. So people see that and say, okay, fine. I mean, I don't want to hurt another person's feelings, but they need to also understand that you don't have to bring in Richard Spencer or Ben Shapiro to really rile everyone up, but to really get someone to sit down with these students and explain to them what's really happening in a more logical way, not a I'm going to own you way. I think that's probably what's going to work to change their minds. And just logical conversations, I guess, will help.
Think, like, if we have healthy activist groups on both sides, it seems like if you had a counter, and again, it doesn't have to be right wing. If you're classical liberal, if you're talking about objective truth ideas, right, that you could come from the right or the left, but you need to have maybe an activist lobby there that's pushing back. It seems to me now, granted, they wouldn't be elected either, but it seems like that's what's happening on college campuses. When we went to the UWM, like the University of Wisconsin Milwaukee, in 2016, there was no Republican group, period. And then 2 years later, we see Ben Shapiro, and then the guy introduces him, and they said, we have 177 members. Okay, that's a pretty big growth for 2 years. So I think that's what's happening, is the right is like, oh, wow, we've got to get activists on the ground right away. And then you have kind of traditional conservatives doing one thing, and then Trumpian, like right, the Trumpian right kind of doing something different.
Yep. Now it's just the two groups just yelling at each other, and then the actual moderates are just sitting around like, come on, guys, let's just have an actual conversation and try to come up with a solution for the issues that you're yelling about, instead of saying this is bad and that is bad. And just watching a lot of the debates between the far left and the far right it's really comical to me. It's the same thing. They're just yelling at each other, but they're the same thing. What's the saying? Different sides of the same coin.
Yeah. Okay. I officially found out we swung and missed on Miles' question. So maybe you could, this would be an interesting piece for you to cover at some point. It says Canada Supreme Court rules Ottawa complicit in abuse of Omar Khadr, Canadian youth at Guantanamo, to be giving access to intelligence files.
Ooh, okay. So I'm actually not as informed as I should be on that topic, and I would unfortunately rather not speak on it. Canada doesn't have free speech. As you guys probably know, we do have something called hate speech. And I think I would probably want to inform myself a little more before going deep into the Omar Khadr situation.
No, that's a good point. But yeah, so something like food for potential thought. I mean, speaking of hate speech, the UK is trying to define Islamophobia right now.
Yeah.
And having a ton of things. I think Canada already did that.
Yes. I forgot what the bill is called, but yeah, there's now Islamophobia law, where you can't. I don't even understand it. It's like you're scared of Islam. Like the word itself is what people had an issue with, but the government again giving into pressures from lobbies, from activist groups into just making it Islamophobia, but. That's not the point. The point is religious discrimination. I can say I'm scared of Judaism. I don't care. I'm scared of Christianity. I don't care. But like to say that you hate, I don't know, to discriminate against someone based on their religion, I think that's where the problem is. So criticism versus discriminating is where Canada doesn't really want to draw a line. So they just created a blanket Islamophobia. Yeah. Don't do that. It's like, what?
You know, isn't it there's a difference between scared and hate?
Yeah.
So I'm scared of dogs. I hate dogs. Two totally different things. Mm-hmm. Like one could have a reasonable fear of dogs, you know, they bark, they're scary or whatever. You know, it's different. This was the attempt at the UK. Quote, Islamophobia is rooted in racism and is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness.
What does that mean? I don't even like that doesn't mean anything. Perceived what? Can you repeat that?
This is identity obsession, right? Yeah. Like Muslimness. Like you've made it into a quality now, the quality of being Muslim. I guess that's Muslimness.
Yeah.
I mean, now there's talk about like the royal baby. Is the royal baby going to be raised black?
I know.
Identity obsession of the highest order.
Yeah. The irony of that whole like article was ridiculous. It was a white woman that wrote it too. Like, what is with white women just like telling Black people are oppressed? Let me tell you. Yeah, are you gonna raise the royal baby as Black? How racist is that? Like, what is that supposed to entail? Like, no, are you gonna culturally raise the baby? Like, what does that even mean? I mean, Meghan is hardly Black. And I think the baby probably wouldn't even look Black. So I don't even know why anyone is so focused on the child's skin color rather than how cute and privileged that little baby.
Yes, his lived experiences are going to be quite unique and are not going to line up with the average Black person. So again, if your identity relates to your lived experiences, in this case, it makes no sense because I can't imagine anyone more privileged than the royal baby.
Exactly. I was like, he is fine. Is he going to be raised Black, white? It doesn't really matter. He's set for life. He doesn't have to think about tuition payments and, oh Lord, he's good.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I'm trying to do my best to try to steelman this argument, and I still don't know if I truly understand it in the way. So I'll give like the kind of the far left that they're due, and maybe that I don't understand what they're saying. That's possible, but God, I don't know any good way to untangle these. Like just because it also allows so many bad actors in to say, okay, well, I want to uplift Black people. Well, how do I tell those people that want to uplift Black people from those that just hate white people?
How do you tell those that want to uplift versus those that...
Yeah. How do I tell, like, say, somebody that says I'm an advocate of the poor, I'm a socialist. How do I determine those that really care about the working class versus those who just hate the rich?
Ask a few more questions.
Yeah, like, right. And how do you tell, like, the person that is pro-Black person versus anti-white?
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. Sometimes I feel like because obsessing so much about identity, we're just making room for people that are going to play on these things to, again, we talk what Brett's saying, start to rip civilization apart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I understand your question. I also
am I right? Do we have to? Can identity ever be a good thing, or do we really have to get back to the individual? To what extent can identity hang in there?
To what extent can identity hang in there
without causing some of these god awful divisions? Is what I'm.
Well, there will always be divisions. I think there's this thing about There can't be socialism, which I'm not for like socialism, but there can't be socialism in the United States because it's not majority one race. It's not majority white, but it can be in Europe because they have majority white. And it's like, wait, no, even white people have differences and they could also pick out their differences, one of them being religious differences. So I don't really think you could get rid of identity. If you remove one, there's just going to be something else. We're just humans, we're competitive. And I think we like to find ways to feel better than others. So honestly, I think the individual aspect of it comes down to, I don't know, opportunity, because identity just means so much. It's not just race. My identity could be, I like Game of Thrones. I like playing video games, D&D. Like those are all make up part of my identity, but then my race doesn't really play into that at all, actually.
Sure. But that's what I guess I mean is specifically a racial identity or a religious identity or a like gender identity, because it seems like to me that it's giving them purpose. Because I agree, I think positive identities like Game of Thrones watcher, father, student, daughter, you know, football captain, the football team, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
like, those are all positive, but specifically like race, gender, and religion seem to be the ones that can get awfully divisive.
yeah, and I mean, I think where it becomes a problem is when it's a us versus them, when it's a you are causing my people pain. That's when it becomes a problem. But with race on its own, you can have different types of music, different types of food. I mean, African American music and food, I would say, is freaking incredible. And I just did a road trip.
Cultural appropriation for me.
Yeah, exactly. I just did a road trip across the South, and I visited Texas, and I went to New Orleans and Memphis, and it was incredible just seeing like the culture and the history there. And it's that itself you can say is an identity, but again, you can just move to California and the Black person there is completely different than someone in Dallas, Texas, let's say. So yeah, I feel like I'm going a little off here.
No, I like it. You're making me think that this is, again, those are positive identities. I say, and maybe it's not even my identity is oppressed, but your identity is the oppressor.
Yes,
maybe that's the toxic piece that's in there.
Yes, because we used to all be able to joke about like white people and Black people. Like I used to make jokes like, "Oh, Bonquisha," and then the white person you say Steve and all of that or whatever. Like, these are all jokes, but now because of this whole power dynamic that's thrown into it, it's now problematic where you can't make a joke about a Black person or that's racist. You know, cultural appropriation. Like the majority of concert goers, I don't freaking know what the word is, but the majority of people that attend rap concert or listen to rap music rather are white. So it's not like this new thing of white people coming out and wanting to appropriate culture. It's just people are choosing to get upset about it right now because they consider white people the oppressor, which is bizarre and ridiculous.
I kind of hope that, I hope it isn't like people are buying into like the critical theory ideas, hook, line, and sinker, because I just can't believe that a lot of people are reading those books. But I wonder if we have a crisis of identity as like a whole, as the nation, like Canada and the United States, and that people don't really feel a strong sense of who they are. With religion going away, they want a purpose, and that a gender identity, a racial identity, that's giving them a purpose. So they've really gone to this place in a way of, let me find myself, but you've come out, or you're getting close to some toxicity.
Yeah, I mean, I actually agree with that point, and I've been noticing that a little bit lately with when I speak to a lot of people that are on the far left that I completely disagree with. It kind of boils down to them being lost and confused about their identity and wanting to fight for the right to keep that identity, which I guess is based on false pretenses or whatever. But oh my gosh, why do I keep losing my train of thought? Wait. Okay, what was your question?
You're talking about like the radical left. Is it this sense of identity that people are going here, not because, oh my God, I read Judith Butler and man, I was convinced, but hearing people talk about this and this identifying with one of these,
oh yes,
unique characteristics.
Yeah. So sorry, what I was saying was, yeah, I think there is a sense of, or there is a loss of identity. I think the economy is not going as well as a lot of people would hope. Less students are going into college and university. There's less, people are waiting longer to have houses, to have kids. So there are a lot of issues happening in society itself. And of course, the search for an identity could just be a symptom of that, of the issues that are actually happening. So in fact, that probably definitely is a symptom of a lot of the issues that are happening. When there's inequality, people tend to want to point a finger at someone else. When people feel that they, you know, they're people in power, or people that with more money, that are privileged, they're getting ahead of the game unfairly, then they will want to come out together and point fingers, because really there's nothing else to fight for but that one thing. But yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think there is this weird loss of identity happening right now, and people trying to find it in the worst possible way ever, might I add.
And some people are saying it could be the flip side, in that we're too prosperous, in that we have so few problems that we're picking on this one, right? You know, if we were all pushed together in a, you know, and an asteroid was going to hit us in 12 years or something like that, and everybody had to work on that thing, or else we're all toast. How much you bet we wouldn't have half of these problems?
I agree. I actually agree with you. I think it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of literally having absolutely nothing to do. And there are others where they are actually struggling and they're trying to fight for that cause. And you mix that together, and the ones that have nothing to do are the voice piece. They're the mouthpiece of the entire movement. Meanwhile, the ones that are actually, you know, suffering or going through whatever they're claiming to be going through are not receiving anything from it, are not actually the voices, are not actually the faces of it. So I find that really, really interesting. And I think there was even in high schools, for example, there's now gender studies classes. And there's all these different classes being added because they're like, oh, we ran out of things to do. Let's do gender studies. And all the students are in there. Or like, you know, mom, I'm trying to find myself. Now finding yourself is a matter of finding your racial identity, your sexual identity, all of that. Not, you know, I want to search for my interests or whatnot. So there is an aspect of boredom in there for sure.
That's awesome. That's a good place. And you know, it's funny, you're coming to our Minds New Jersey event. That's on the Saturday of Labor Day weekend, I believe, August 31st. And you're on a panel where we're talking about activism, like what's corporate America's role in activism. None of which we talked about today, which is hilarious. But I think that will be, we'll let you delve into that when you're on the panel. But we're definitely really excited to see you in New Jersey. If you haven't gotten your tickets yet, use code, it's Josephine, and you can get 10% off. So use code Josephine to get your tickets for the Minds in real life in New Jersey. And meet her. I've met her once, and the last time when I met you at MythCon, we got to talk for like literally 20 seconds before we got cut off, and I was totally bummed out of blast. But I totally didn't get to talk to you, so I'm looking forward to doing that in New Jersey.
Hey, thank you. And I'm really glad you guys invited me to this. I'm really excited for it, for sure. I'm nervous, but excited.
That's great. And definitely her channel, YouTube, my name is Josephine. It really, they're great shorts, somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes long, very well edited, packed with facts. You've really got a lot of good stuff in there. Pick any one. They're worth watching, guys. And we really appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time.